The first time it happened, I thought it was just a mistake. A bank statement that should have arrived in the first week of the month never showed up, and when I called the bank, they swore it had been mailed. I brushed it off as a mix-up at the post office. But then, a week later, my Amazon package vanished without a trace. The tracking number showed it had been delivered, left neatly in my mailbox. Yet when I opened the little metal door, it was empty. I started to feel that familiar knot in my stomach, the one that whispers this isn't coincidence. Soon after, I began paying closer attention. I checked the mailbox at the exact time the carrier dropped things off. Sometimes it was full, but more often than not, it was suspiciously empty. When I mentioned the problem to a neighbor across the street, she frowned. "Funny you say that," she said. "My electric bill never came last month." And Susan down the block said her medication refill disappeared too. That was when the pattern clicked. This wasn't just me. Someone was taking the mail. My mind immediately thought of Karen. Every HOA has one, and ours was worse than most. She strutted around the neighborhood like she owned every sidewalk, clipboard in hand, always on the lookout for violations. She knew everyone's schedules, who parked where, who left a trash bin out too long. She had even bragged once at a meeting that she kept an eye on things better than the police. And lately, I had noticed something else: Karen's timing. Whenever the mail carrier came by, Karen seemed to suddenly just happen to be in her front yard, pruning a rose bush or sweeping the driveway. It was just a hunch, but it made the hairs on the back of my neck rise. Could she really be stealing people's mail? It sounded absurd, like something out of a TV drama. But the more I thought about it, the less absurd it seemed. Karen had always been nosy, always prying into other people's business. Mail was the ultimate window into someone's private life. Bills, letters, packages, all filled with details about who you were and what you did. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the empty spot where my package should have been, and decided it was time to stop brushing this off. Something wasn't right, and if Karen really was behind it, she was about to learn that stealing mail wasn't just nosy HOA behavior. It was a federal crime. Do you want me to go ahead and expand Chapter 2 in the same style, about 400 words? The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep ignoring the uneasy feeling twisting in my gut. If Karen really was behind the missing mail, she wasn't just being the neighborhood busybody, she was committing a serious crime. Still, I wanted to give her the chance to explain, maybe even to prove my suspicions wrong. After all, accusing someone outright without evidence could create more trouble than it solved. So I walked over to her house, trying to keep my voice calm as I rehearsed what I would say. Karen was in her yard, as usual, fussing with a row of flower pots lined up along her walkway. She spotted me right away, narrowing her eyes like I had already done something wrong. Before I could even finish a greeting, she said, "Your grass is looking patchy again. The HOA has rules about lawn maintenance, you know." I took a slow breath, refusing to let her drag the conversation away. "Actually, Karen, I wanted to ask if you've noticed anything strange with the mail around here. Some of mine has gone missing." A few neighbors mentioned the same thing. Her reaction was immediate and sharp. She jerked upright, clutching her gardening gloves like I had accused her of something far worse. "Are you suggesting I have anything to do with that?" Her voice was loud, higher pitched than normal, carrying across the quiet street. A curtain twitched in a neighbor's window, and I realized she wanted people to hear her outrage. I tried to stay neutral. "No, I'm just asking if you've seen anything unusual. You're outside a lot, so maybe you noticed someone hanging around." Karen scoffed, folding her arms. "Don't try to twist this. I have better things to do than snoop on people's boring bills. Maybe if you kept track of your own stuff, you wouldn't be misplacing it." Honestly, some people will blame anyone but themselves. The way she spat the words out only deepened my suspicion. Her defensiveness was too strong, too rehearsed. It wasn't the response of someone simply denying a baseless accusation. It was the kind of reaction that made me wonder if I had struck a nerve. I didn't push further. Instead, I nodded politely and left, but inside my head, the doubts had turned into certainty. Karen was hiding something, and I wasn't going to get answers from her directly. If she really was stealing the neighborhood's mail, it was time to bring in someone who could catch her in the act. Do you want me to continue with Chapter 3 next, around 400 words? When I filed my third complaint at the post office, I expected the usual polite nods and promises to look into it. Instead, the clerk gave me a knowing glance and disappeared into the back room. A few minutes later, a man in a suit and badge stepped out and introduced himself as a postal inspector. His calm, no-nonsense demeanor told me this wasn't the first time he dealt with something like this. I explained the missing mail, the neighbor's similar stories, and my suspicion about Karen. He listened without interrupting, jotting notes on a small pad before saying, "If what you're describing is true, this isn't just a nuisance, it's a federal offense, and we have ways of finding out." The inspector laid out a plan that felt almost like something from a crime show. They would set up a sting operation using a decoy package addressed to me. Inside would be a tiny GPS tracker and a discreet dye packet that would burst if tampered with. On top of that, a surveillance camera would be positioned to cover the mailbox, recording anyone who came too close after the mail carrier left. All I had to do was act normal, check my mail like usual, and let them handle the rest. The next few days crawled by as I waited. My nerves were stretched thin, every creak of the mailbox lid making me jump. Finally, on a sunny afternoon, the carrier slipped the decoy package inside and drove off. I pretended to water my lawn, heart pounding as I glanced across the street. Sure enough, there she was, Karen, pacing around her yard like a hawk circling prey. She kept glancing at my mailbox, her eyes darting left and right as though calculating who might be watching. I forced myself to stay calm, though my fists clenched tight around the garden hose. Minutes later, Karen strolled casually down the sidewalk, pausing just long enough to glance at my mailbox. Then, with a quick flick of her wrist, she pulled the package out and tucked it under her arm, acting as if it were her own. The inspector, parked nearby in an unmarked car, radioed in quietly. Within moments, another vehicle pulled up at the end of the street. I could feel my pulse in my ears. The trap had been sprung, and Karen had taken the bait. Do you want me to go ahead and finish with Chapter 4 in the same expanded 400-word style? Karen barely made it halfway up her driveway before the unmarked car's door swung open. The postal inspector approached with steady steps, his badge glinting in the afternoon sun. "Ma'am," he called firmly, "I need you to stop right there." For the first time since I'd known her, Karen froze. She clutched the package tighter against her side, her face draining of color as though she'd been caught holding a live grenade. "What is this about?" she snapped, trying to muster the same superiority she always wielded at HOA meetings, but her voice wavered. The inspector held up his credentials. "United States Postal Inspection Service. You're in possession of mail that does not belong to you." The moment hung thick in the air. I stood at the edge of my lawn, my neighbors beginning to drift outside as word spread that something unusual was happening. Karen's eyes darted around, as if searching for someone to back her up, but no one stepped forward. Instead, phones came out, recording every second. I was just holding it for safekeeping. She blurted out, "It was sticking out of the mailbox. I didn't want it to get stolen." Her excuse only earned a sharp shake of the inspector's head. He motioned to his partner, who had arrived from the second vehicle. They carefully retrieved the package from her arms, showing the hidden tracker blinking inside and the dye packet still intact. Tampering with or stealing mail is a federal crime, the inspector explained, his tone unflinching. You're under arrest. The words hit harder than any HOA fine Karen had ever dished out. She sputtered, flailed her arms, even tried to protest that she was protecting the neighborhood, but the handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists. The sight was surreal, the self-appointed enforcer of our community rules now standing in her front yard, bound and humiliated. Police officers arrived shortly after to transport her, and the inspector assured us that the case would be handled in federal court. As Karen was led into the squad car, a wave of relief rippled through the Chew neighborhood. Conversation sparked up immediately stories of missing mail, late bills, vanished packages, all of them now making sense. For the first time in months, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The mailbox, once a symbol of frustration and suspicion, was just a mailbox again. Karen's reign of petty control and quiet theft was finally over, and this time there would be no HOA rule she could hide behind.